The show is declining in quality so rapidly. I'm genuinely curious as to how and where it could possibly go next. If nothing else, Season 3 proves that there really is no rhyme or reason as to why any of this story is unfolding, aside from the fact that it is recognizable, popular, and probably boosts Netflix subscriptions. As if the fact that a show called 13 Reasons Why is already 39 episodes long wasn't comical enough, we're dealing with the aftermath of an event so distant at this point that it's very difficult to justify why any of this is truly necessary aside from the pure, juicy drama of it all. Season 3 shifts gears in such a way that would be fine if it wasn't treated like it's doing us some kind of virtuous service, as if this show is anything more than the melodramatic high school drama aimed at young teenagers that it indeed is. In all honesty, I kind of enjoy my yearly dose of this series due to the absurd levels they have to stretch in order to keep this angsty snowball rolling. At the very least, I find it to be somewhat comically entertaining as a trashy drama aimed at young adults, but I'm not sure that's the kind of feedback the creators were hoping for.
Wow! Tell us all about it!
Okay then, if Season 1 is about what led to the end of Hannah Baker and Season 2 is about the court case that preceded, then Season 3 is simply a whodunit murder mystery, with the hook or central question of the season being, who killed... All of the marketing was brandished with the question of who was responsible. Who did it? Who killed Bryce?
You're a horrible person.
Yeah, pretty much.
At this point in the show, though, we're very aware of how evil Bryce Walker is. He's so comically maniacal over the first 2 seasons that it's obvious he was set up and marked as the major antagonist. And his comeuppance is the only narrative beat that has any consequence, besides the more pedantic pieces of drama that fill out the minute-to-minute of the show.
How long you been juicing?
In order for this season to come together, the writers decided that for this story to have any weight behind it, Bryce needed to come across as being more complicated and well-rounded.
You don't want to die?
Come on, dude, you could kill the monster.
So you felt more conflicted over his demise. Problem is, you ideally should have been sowing those seeds since the beginning, to avoid it coming across as retroactive and kinda cheap. For a show that typically seems to have dealt in pretty clear absolutes, it's very strange to me that 3 seasons in is when they suddenly feel inspired to add a bit of greyness to the intentions of their more controversial characters.
What the hell happened? What have you done?
It reminds me of the tropey writing something like The Walking Dead often falls into, where a minor character suddenly gets an intense backstory that fleshes them out mere moments before they are killed, so their death appears to have more impact. With the way the show has been structured and written, it seems obvious to me that everything after the original material has been composed backwards. They seem to have a pre-prepared list of dramatic and controversial ideas that fit in line with what made the original book so famous, or infamous, depending on who you ask. And instead of writing realistic people that progress in a relatable and honest approach, they appear to force the square peg into a round hole to continue to double down on this idea that 13 Reasons Why is on the cutting edge of socio-political commentary.
I think it's mature and responsible storytelling on the part of Brian Yorkey and the writers. I mean, it's courageous too.
So how do they attempt to make you feel sympathy for a violent, serial abuser fiend? Well, their answer was to hammer home this idea that at the end of it all, despite the consistent and insistent amount of pure evil he has displayed in front of us, that, come on guys, he's still a person at the end of the day, right?
He's a f***ing person, Clay. Human being.
One of the main themes of this season is this idea that parents and or family have a huge role to play in shaping troubled lives. That behind broken or evil people is some kind of underlying trauma, be it a fiercely homophobic father, a distant, unloving mother, or whatever it may be. Which is an interesting idea to explore. There are a lot of movies I like that deal with these very themes. However, the script here is far too hokey and silly to sell any of it.
Knock knock, parent entering. Parent entering.
Let's not forget that at the start of Season 3, Bryce is known to us as the guy who started the initial rumors about Hannah, viciously sexually assaulted a minimum of 3 different people with more implied victims, started more nasty rumors, this time about Jessica, tormented Zach by messing with Hannah's locker, lied while under oath countless times, and probably many more horrendous acts I've forgotten about. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't really think that Bryce could be properly redeemed as a character under any sense, really, with what we've already seen him do. Like, this is very extreme. Like, what he did is abhorrent. This guy is eviler than the fucking Emperor. The only possible way I could see it going down was perhaps in season 3 his arc was to come to the realization of what he'd done and confess the truth to the police and take his punishment like a responsible person. No, he wouldn't be forgiven, but that's the only real way I could see you taking this character in a sympathetic direction and still maintaining some modicum of reasonable sense. It's true that suddenly Bryce seems to have some kind of realization in season 3 about what he's done and why it was bad. I assume they were going for a conflicted character who was fighting against the evil instincts that had defined him for so many years, which we learn seems to originate from a troubled family life growing up with parents that didn't love him properly. This show abuses the idea that if you have a sad backstory, that automatically makes the concept of evil deeds inherently more grey. However, as I already mentioned, it's looking for justification after the fact instead of having some kind of plan for the character from the beginning. It comes across that way anyway. Intentions aside, the execution of this character is where things completely fall apart, all for the sake of this ridiculous murder mystery. Bryce follows through on some of the more dastardly crimes yet in season 3. A particular standout moment for me being when he breaks into his dad's mansion to vandalize it, except it's revealed that he went to the wrong house and winds up threatening a small child with a knife, like an actual deranged sociopath. Well, I suppose he's only human.
Speak and you die. What the fuck?
Juxtapose that insanity against the attempts to humanize him, and you wind up with some brilliant unintentional comedy, such as when Bryce and his mother finally bond by throwing paint on each other.
No! No! Speak and you die.
This is without even mentioning the very intentional and petty physical assault that Bryce commits in the penultimate episode. Story-wise, this is for the character of Zack to have motivation to beat Bryce to a pulp, so he can be a red herring for the real killer. But anyway, Bryce decides to plow his body at full speed into Zack during the chaos of a riot that takes place in the middle of an American football match in episode 12. This is, of course, fueled by pure jealousy because Zack moved in on Bryce's ex-girlfriend, likely ruining any chance of Zack's sporting career permanently. Might as well add a final destroyed life to the pile of chaos that this nasty character has left in his wake.
We're going to hell. Well, I'll see you there.
I mean, to be fair, he is only human. If that wasn't enough to prove how terrible this character is, I went to the 13 Reasons Why wiki, which is hilarious by the way, where I noticed some interesting, and pretty poorly written, observations. I find it very curious that for a supposedly grey character, he has a dedicated section on his wiki listed as enemies, where most of his crimes are conveniently listed in relation to the major characters. Oh god. Wow, what a horrible person. In the end, Bryce turned out to be a far more complicated character than people first believed him to be. His crimes are inexcusable, but he did try to make up for his crimes and seek some sort of redemption for what he has done. No, he didn't. You're talking about the same character who is listed under his personality section as a cruel, arrogant, spoiled, manipulative, violent, and selfish person, and is a very dangerous individual. That sounds like a more accurate description to me. It doesn't matter to me how many times he has a paint fight with his mother, apologizes to his victims, has a weird relationship with his dad, has a go at his meanie grandfather, or complains about the world not allowing him to change.
Trying to be better. Fucking world won't let me.
If anything, with the way it's presented, he comes across as a fairly consistent liar, who is never truly being genuine because as the viewer, we get to see that he really hasn't changed at all. It's even revealed that he's managed to fool multiple therapists.
Why not a real therapist?
Bryce, I've been to 3 already, and fooled them all.
As well as being responsible for having Tony's entire family get deported.
They already have my dad scheduled for deportation.
Jesus, Tony.
That's most of what bothered me about this character in this season, aside from one important detail, I guess, that being his relation to a new member of the cast. Annie, or Lil Annie, as I like to call her, is arguably the protagonist of Season 3, which is a strange decision for multiple reasons. She is essential to the structure of the season, with her narration being framed as a recounting to the police of the full murder mystery story, as you later find out. I don't really understand why it was necessary to add yet another person to this already huge cast, aside from the need to have a vessel that everyone can dump exposition onto and over-explain everything, as well as being a new face to have in a love triangle between Clay and Bryce. Yeah, there are so many love triangles it's hard to keep track. Lil Annie is written as an irritating know-it-all who loves the sound of her own voice and miraculously instantly connects with everyone that she meets, as a weak writing trick designed around shortcutting the need to have her relationships progress in a more believable manner.
Well, I look at you and I see a badass.
She's a blank slate who is used to second guess and constantly question everyone to keep them spouting the awful dialogue.
God damn it, honey, I need you. No! How is everybody today?
Oh my god, it is bad. She's also got a British accent for some reason, which I hate because I hate British people and their stupid accents.
Oh, I wasn't going to say anything, but thank you.
She quickly gets dangerously entangled in the entire affair, forming a strange relationship with Bryce and sleeping with him multiple times.
I slept with Bryce more than once.
It doesn't make her a very likable character, but at least she knows by the end it was an extremely immoral thing to do.
That's the worst thing I've ever done.
Yes, it was the worst thing you've ever done. She's the most proactive character in terms of moving the mystery of the plot along, with her motivation being that she wants to find out who murdered Bryce because of her intimate involvement with him. I find it odd that they insisted on her being the lead detective of the story, instead of the literal police officer, who has been established, I think since the beginning, multiple seasons. Turns out he's the father of the murderer too. So that would be inherent added drama, but I suppose that would distract from the high school tween nonsense.
We will get you whatever help you need, Justin.
Oh, spoilers. I decided to lump these characters together for a couple of reasons. First of all, as if one love triangle wasn't enough, they needed to have a pesky little cheating side quest going on in the background, with Jessica juggling a relationship with the two fellas at once to add to the theatre of it all. I already spoiled it, but it's revealed that technically Alex is the one who deals the final blow to Bryce, so he gets credit for the kill. It's fine though, because they agree to frame another character I haven't mentioned yet, Monty. We'll get to him later though.
You're a crazy bitch.
Yeah. And you should fear that.
The murder scene is a complete mess because of the shift Bryce goes through depending on what is convenient at the time to the script. At first he tries to make a case that he's trying to change and that the world won't let him, even though he hasn't really done anything aside from continue to be evil. Even going as far as to have made a confession tape to give to people instead of just telling the police. Why would you do that? However, the moment he's helped up by Alex, he says he's going to destroy Zach and break his other knee.
I'm gonna fuck up his other knee and wreck his fucking life!
Which you might justify as him being angry in the heat of the moment. He did get his ass kicked after all.
I'm gonna fucking destroy him!
But to me, it comes across as if his true nature is to be a violent maniac, as we've seen for 3 seasons. Either way, Alex kills him and they cover it up. The characters are covering up murders at this point. The main cast is so morally bankrupt at this point that I'm pretty sure there isn't a single one of them that doesn't belong in jail for the seriousness of their crimes. I suppose you could make a case for some of them before people were being beaten and murdered and hiding weapons so the police don't find it. What is going on?
Is that where you guys dumped Tyler's guns?
Correct.
But it's hard to root for these characters considering the lengths they're willing to go to lie and cover up the truth of what really happened. They appear to make up their own moral code as they go along and take the law into their own hands, which would be fine if this show was treated for what it is and not sold as if it's this important learning tool for young people to start having a conversation.
The show, which obviously is a weighty and important show.
Justin doesn't particularly get up to much this season aside from dealing drugs from the 13 Reasons Why coffee shop they're all obsessed with. I suppose this and any other show would be quite a big deal, but that's a relatively tame story beat compared to everything else that's going on. We're told that Justin has an intense bond with Clay, as he was adopted into the Jensen family last season, but I can't help but wonder why Justin wasn't used more in the investigation side of the mystery. It would have made a lot more sense to me to have Justin and Clay team up to find out the truth of what happened. It's not like a lack of motivation would be an issue, seeing as they both have fairly intimate backstories with Bryce at this point. I suppose we always have next season to explore the sexual tension of Justin and Clay.
I'd do anything for you. Anything.
Same.
This character cannot seem to catch a break. His first love killed herself, one lover had a bipolar breakdown and changed school, and his latest fling chose a serial sex offender over him. But that's not to say that this character is particularly likable otherwise. I have no issues with the actor, I don't blame him at all. In fact, the actors are probably the only reason anyone likes this show to begin with. However, Clay is so earnest and trusting of everyone, to the point where I'm fairly sick of him and his bullshit.
What?
His character really started to crumble the moment he put himself in front of an armed shooter in a misguided and dangerous attempt to be like a superhero like one of the comics he loves so much.
You just ripped my favorite character to shreds.
At first I was disappointed that the ghost visions of Hannah that were prevalent in Season 2 had subsided, seemingly for good. However, they had to have at least one scene where, this time, Clay has a showdown with Ghost Bryce, which I quite enjoyed.
I may be gone from this earth, but I will be reborn in the bodies of 1,000,000 men.
My theory is that the next season is going to be, in part anyway, about some kind of mental illness that Clay is diagnosed with. My reasoning for this being that in one scene, his parents question Justin in a way that seems to indicate they have reason to believe he has something going on mentally. We'll have to wait and see on that one though.
Like he couldn't stop thinking about her? Or like he was hearing her?
Clay's main purpose in the story this season is to be another red herring. You're supposed to believe that he was capable of being the one who murdered Bryce. It even goes so far at one point that he's the main suspect in the case and is actually arrested. I fail to feel much sympathy for him though, because ultimately this entire situation could have been avoided if he wasn't such a moron and kept secrets from everyone. This school shooter aspect has spiraled the plot out of control so fast, all because of the way most of the characters agreed to cover for. Season 2 obviously ended with the bombshell of Clay stopping Tyler from going Columbine, so the results ripple into Season 3 and have to be explained away with the most moronic decision-making this group has made yet. Instead of getting this kid the help he clearly needs and making sure he takes liability for his actions, they dividend responsibility between the group and implicate themselves to make sure Tyler is never given a chance to snap again and murder people. Yeah, that's their plan. Wow, these mental health expert children. Most characters are deeply frightened of what he's capable of.
I kept a gun.
You what?
And I didn't tell you guys because, I had a feeling that you'd get mad.
And Clay even admits that he has nightmares about being slaughtered by him.
In the dream, you pull the trigger.
Luckily though, Tyler is made out to be such a sweetheart to make sure to justify the ridiculous actions of last season. They try to make the case that it was all worth it in the end, that Clay made the right decision. Step in front of a shooter. Go on. That's clever, because he's just a human after all. However, being the complete imbeciles that they are, they decided to hide his bag of dangerous firearms in the water where fishermen constantly peruse. So obviously the season ends with a tease of the guns being found, implying that part of next season all sorts of drama is going to unfold. I'm glad, quite frankly, they deserve everything that is coming to them. Most of the scenes with Tyler are him apologizing for nearly killing his classmates, and coming to terms with the horrendous abuse he received in the last episode of Season 2 at the hands of...
So yeah, Monty kind of steps in as the lead villain in Liberty.
This character is fairly similar to Bryce. He's not quite as mustache twirling, but they take his character in a similar direction in terms of giving him a sad backstory, where it turns out he's a closeted gay with a nasty father. His main role in the plot is to effectively be set up as another red herring, and eventually be the fall guy for Bryce's death.
Monty realised that the cycle had to be broken somehow,
so the others can get away with murder and cover it up. He also conveniently gets killed off-screen, as we're told by the police that he was killed in jail.
But Montgomery De La Cruz was killed in his jail cell just hours ago.
I suppose you can have a crystal clear conscience, can't you, you monsters?
Okay, he was a human being.
Oh gosh, shut your face. This is the final character I briefly want to talk about because he's my personal favourite. He's the only one who calls the group out on their idiotic decision making.
This is bullshit. I'm out. I'm scared of you. And to be honest, I don't trust you.
Parent entering.
We even see how kind he is to Bryce's ex-girlfriend in the fairly preachy Planned Parenthood episode, which I haven't really talked about because...
I'm going to explain the procedure to you, and you will go over some paperwork, and you will come back Saturday morning. When you return on Saturday, we will take your blood pressure. You should fear that.
That's most of what stood out about Season 3 to me. There's plenty of minutiae that could be talked about in more detail, but honestly, I could be here forever talking about how bad this is. As you can tell, and you'll especially know this if you've watched it yourself, this is easily the messiest and most ridiculous season yet. It so desperately wants to be taken seriously that it winds up becoming even more of a parody of itself than the depths it sunk to in Season 2. It's utterly tone deaf, nothing about the production is particularly interesting in terms of presentation, and even when they attempt something stylistic, it falls flat on its face. I'm of course talking about the ridiculous amounts of flashbacks the show is structured around, that have a slightly different colour palette. But the timeline is so muddled, it doesn't do much to help you understand where a scene is supposed to be taking place. The gross oversimplification of heavy subjects is as bad as ever, shock value is appreciated over any real character arcs, and the murder mystery angle is an extremely silly, pulpy beat that only adds to the overall melodrama of the show. Personally, I found it to be fairly enjoyable in a so bad that it's good kind of way, mostly because of the shock of where the writers chose to take this season, and I have to say I'm fairly excited for how they're going to attempt to continue this mess of a story. But this is no doubt the weakest season yet. They've written themselves into such a corner by forcing the show to go so far beyond its source material that at this point I'm curiously along for the ride, purely for how they're going to try to keep this material weighty and important while the stupidity continues to escalate. I suppose they're the winners in the end though. They kept this conversation going for a bloody long video.